All right, let's go live now to Tokyo. I'm joined by Professor Stephen Nagi. He's an expert on Japanese foreign policy at the International Christian University there in the Japanese capital. First of all, just tell us about the significance of this meeting between these two leaders, given some of that history that we heard there.
Great to be here with you, Carl. Yes, it's been 10 years since both leaders have got together. The colonial history of the Japanese still weighs heavily within the Korean mindset. But that being said, we've seen President Yoon make tremendous efforts to try and rehabilitate the relationship, to reset the relationship, which has manifested in Prime Minister Kishida visiting Seoul just yesterday, visiting the National Cemetery, and again expressing his prayers to the fallen Korean soldiers, but also welcoming President Yoon to another summit that's coming up this month. That's at the G7. Again, we see a convergence of interests. Both leaders looking forward, but not forgetting the past.
Now, Professor, we heard earlier from the Japanese Prime Minister another thing he said, and this was the quote that was making headlines. Kishida said that his heart aches thinking about the suffering of Koreans during Japan's colonial rule. How is that statement, and how is this visit overall being seen in South Korea?
Well, this is the difficult part of both countries, the democratic states. There's lots of different views, and Prime Minister Kishida expressed his personal view about the colonial period. Again, this heartfelt sorrow that he feels with understanding the past. South Koreans themselves, many look at President Yoon's reach out to Japan as something that's inappropriate. They see the Japanese have not repented enough on their colonial past, but others in the South Korean context are welcoming greater participation and cooperation with Japan to deal with the real challenges within the region. That's weapons of mass destruction, proliferation on the Korean Peninsula, and the growing challenge of China within the region in terms of its economic coercion, its expanding military presence within the region, and its eschewing international law in the South China Sea.
Yeah, you touched on it there. I mean, meetings between these two countries were rare. Now we've seen two meetings in just a couple of months. Talk a bit about the timing here and also the agenda. What are they trying to get done?
As I mentioned, President Yoon, prior to becoming president and during president, has put a top priority in terms of rehabilitating the bilateral relations. He understands that South Korean security, its economic prosperity, will be linked to working with Japan and the United States. And it's going to have to work with these countries to push back against North Korea, as well as deal with the challenges of arisen China. Both leaders see that cooperation bilaterally, trilaterally with the United States, but also in venues such as the G7 as really, really important venues to deal with the economic challenges associated with the post-COVID-19 pandemic, dealing with authoritarian states such as Russia and China in terms of wanting to change the security architecture within the region, and really ensuring that those democratic principles that Japan and South Korea share remain vibrant, remain protected, and really are the barometer of how the region develops, not through the lens of authoritarian states.
We saw South Korean President Yoon here in Washington, D.C. Last month. He had this big diplomatic visit, several days, visiting with President Biden. What role do you think the U.S. hopes to play with not only South Korea, but specifically with Japan as well?
Well, the United States hopes that its two friends, allied partners, work much more coherently together, that they deal with the past, that they think about a forward-leaning presence. But I should be very frank, it's not just the United States that has these views about South Korea and Japan. Canada, Australia, India, Southeast Asian countries, and the European Union all want these two democratic partners to work more closely together, to put the past behind them, and to use their collective resources to deal with the real challenges within the region.
Briefly, if you can, we have about 45 seconds left. What comes next now between these two countries? They're calling this shuttle diplomacy, right? So this idea of the two leaders going back and forth, what can we see going forward?
Well, I see both Tokyo and Seoul working together on security issues, economic security, and cooperation within the G7 and other multilateral institutions to bring stability to the global economy, to deal with security challenges such as authoritarian states, and really to quietly work together on dealing with the past through further diplomacy through student exchanges and scholar exchanges, and really trying to build a future by not forgetting the past.
Interesting stuff there. Professor Stephen Nagi, he's an expert on Japanese foreign policy at the International Christian University in Tokyo. Thank you so much for your time.